The 2022 FIFA World Cup officially kicked off over the weekend. The event is expected to be the most watched in history, with an estimated 5 billion people tuning in to the pitch. For more on the World Cup, let's bring in Brendan McKenna, Wells Fargo international economist. We're going to explain why an economist is here to talk about the World Cup in a bit, Brendan. But let's talk about the cloud of controversy. It certainly has to be addressed when you think about how Qatar came about to host the World Cup. Obviously, there were those reports years ago, essentially, that Qatar paid bribes to FIFA to secure this. There were the reports about the conditions the migrant workers had to endure to build out the stadiums. I mean, at the end of the day, if we're talking about the economic impact to Qatar, how significant is it?
I think it's very interesting, and I think it could be a very significant impact. I look at it from two different angles, though. I think the immediate financial gain is probably negligible. I don't think the tourism receipts will really offset the amount that Qatar has actually spent on infrastructure to prepare to host the World Cup. So from a financial perspective, there may be losses associated with hosting. But nevertheless, I think over the longer term, the economic impact could actually be quite significant in a positive way. In the sense that Qatar is looking to diversify its economy, and maybe if they host a successful World Cup, and that's a big if, maybe they can attract more foreign investment into the country to kind of make a little bit more progress on those economic diversification efforts. So it's a little unclear as of right now what the economic implications will be, but nevertheless, I think there'll be two competing angles to take a look at and kind of define success of hosting the World Cup for Qatar.
Yeah, we mentioned this is going to be the most watched World Cup. It's also the most expensive World Cup when you think about how much Qatar had to put up to host all of this. I mean, kind of break that down for us, how this compares with some other World Cups that we've seen and why that cost has been so significant.
So the cost that Qatar has kind of put forward and laid out to host the World Cup is really staggering any way you slice it. So on a nominal dollar amount, Qatar has spent $220 billion on infrastructure, and that's stadiums, roads, hotels, you name it. And that has dwarfed any other World Cup outlay as far as infrastructure spending. So to put that in perspective, in 2018, Russia spent about $14 or $15 billion on infrastructure. In 2014, Brazil was a little bit less, around 10, 11 billion. So you can kind of see the range of dollar amounts that Qatar has put forward. And then in terms of GDP, Qatar is spending just about 1 year of annual economic output. Russia and Brazil have spent a little less than 1% of annual economic output. So in nominal dollar terms and percent of GDP, the amount of money that Qatar has spent has really been incredible.
Finally, Brendan, you've got the U.S. taking on Wales in a few hours. Certainly, a lot of people started trying to pick their favorites already, but you've got an actual method that you applied to the World Cup that sort of draws from the Economist playbook. Talk me through what that method is and who came out on top.
Sure. So the method is actually quite simple. We just take our economic and currency analysis playbook and really just apply it to football. So the same way we analyze the fundamentals of how economies are performing, the fundamentals of how a currency should perform, we basically analyze the fundamentals of football. So we looked at how teams are ranked, the kinds of points that they've accumulated from a FIFA and ELO perspective, and then also the type of momentum that these teams have had over the last 10 games, how many goals they've scored, how many goals they've given up. And then we actually dove into the individual players that comprise those rosters. So we looked into the attack players, the midfielders, the defenders, and really all of the indicators that should make a good football team. So that's kind of the methodology and some of the perspective that we applied from the economics perspective to football. And then when you kind of add it all up, Brazil comes out on top, beating Germany in the finals.
Brazil, the potential champion. We're going to have to check back in with you at the end of all of the action, Brendan, to see if those predictions hold. But it's good to have you on today. Wells Fargo international economist Brendan McKenna joining us there.